Great importance is attached to the search for knowledge in India. The ultimate goal is philosophical, making not merely the subject but also the path to that knowledge crucial. A quest for beauty, a journey of faith, loyalty, tolerance, and patience. And it is in this that the relationship between the teacher and pupil, two individuals of unequal knowledge, becomes vital. The bond between them carries over to the realm of that which keeps one centered through life, gives joy beyond one's occupation, family ties, tragedy, and change. It takes great care and humility to find the right teacher, and great sensitivity too, that one may deserve the other. For the disciple, it means being with the teacher, learning about life while growing into adulthood, humbling the self in order to create the space within to learn the mysteries of the art form. It is this bond that ensures the passing on from generation to generation what is most valuable in Indian culture, the realms of literature and poetry, the art of movement and expression, the colors of nature, the melodies of 1,000 musicians, the philosophy of oneness, of love and trust, of life and beyond, of serenity within and without.
I was born in Bombay. I started very early. Started at the age of 4. Started my varishais and formal training into music. My mother was behind it. And there was this lady in the neighborhood, Kamala Parmeshwaran. So I went to her and started my Sarali Varshai. She was a strict teacher. But the mommy in the neighborhood, I used to be terrified of her and didn't like going to class very much. But I ended up learning a lot. So I progressed very quickly. When I was very tiny, I started singing Varnams, Adatala Varnams, learning it all up at a very early age. And I was treated like one little doll by the older students. But my mother had clearly a good plan. She was very serious about music, though she did not become a professional. She did not have the opportunity, but she learned from great masters. She learned from Karur Chinnasamy Iyer, the violinist of yesteryears. And she was a very spirited woman. In those days, like uh, uh, early 1940s, no, she was a graduate, English literature. She was working in Karur as a school teacher. That was a big thing in those days, to be employed and to be self-reliant. And my grandmother also was very keen about music. She had good jnanam. So my mother saw to it that my learning started at some point, and she always had some dreams for me that I should do something she could not. And she used to recall her days with Karur Chinnasamy Iyer, who lived in that Karur town, and he wouldn't teach many students. He would practice early in the morning. And sometimes she would say, he didn't want others to see what he's practicing. Like that. And then Karur Chinnasamy Iyer said, நீங்கள் கிடுகிடுன்னு நொட்டேஷன் எழுதிக்க மாட்டேங்கிறீங்களே அப்படின்னு, that stuck to her. So she thought that I should develop those skills of being, slightly bright and to be able to handle notations. And all this she had in her head, which I didn't know. Then she said, no, you should also learn the Veena, because something I think I lack is proper Swarajnanam at the right time. So she put me with a Veena teacher, Srimati Lalita Venkatraman. Lalita Venkatraman had a fascination for the Karakudi Bani. She was a very, very kind lady. And in her days, she was a big star. Like, she used to perform for the Mysore court. She was summoned by the Maharaja. I didn't know how important it was. But then it was a relation to a totally different time frame. And then she taught me Sarali Varshes with Gamakam. And she taught me skills, how to handle the meat, how to stop the meat. I think that was a very important lesson. So by the time I graduated to playing Varnams on the Veena, I was about 10 years of age, 10, 11. And I knew how it should sound in vocal music. And those were the days of national program and not even cassettes at that time. Cassettes came some 5, 6 years later. And it was expensive. And I had two doting elder brothers, much elder to me. So in every which was a protected, very loving family. And I was the center of the universe for them. At the same time, I think I was not spoiled, because my mother used to be at me. I had to do things. Practice was important. Veena class or a music class can never be missed. I compensated for it by not doing my homework and being a, you know, totally disinterested about my studies. I was about more than average, clear my exams, and that was it. So my Veena training continued like this for a period of time. Lot of concerts are happening in Bombay to listen to. Bombay is still dotted with sabhas in each suburb. So at a point there are 15 sabhas operating, and when a musician came from the south, you could have 4, 5 opportunities to. That was huge. So my mother would bribe me with chocolates, of course, and then make me simply sit. Then I started enjoying it. The earliest concerts that I got to hear was in the Shanmugananda Sabha, where we were members, and the concerts used to happen 2 days. It was different. It was different because at that time there was no television. The only other thing was national program on alternate Saturdays. So to be featured somewhere there was, it was the ultimate in exposure. This stuck to the glamour of it. Really, I remember those days. The bustle, people coming in nicely dressed clothes, and most of all the air conditioning. That was such a novelty value to be sitting in air conditioning. It was nice. There's another thing that strikes me about the concerts of that period. They had a huge star value is one thing. Knowing a musician was something like knowing a movie star. They had that sort of sway over the art loving public. And a concert in Shanmugananda meant a big thing on, the people's calendar. So much later, like this, I got to hear Brindamma. She was singing with Vega and MDR, who visited Bombay very frequently. And there was this Sabha in Anushakti Nagar, which I discovered some time later, where you could just sit next to the stage and, I'd be generally on the first row, seated in the floor. I can't forget those MDR concerts with Umayalpuram Shivaraman on the mridangam and VVS on the violin. Unforgettable. And it was semi-open air and, very beautiful setting. And so the artists always gave their best there. So have heard a lot of concerts. I think I miss that sort of situation now. Now there's so much of avenue. Music is everywhere, but it's not the same like it was then. It's so easy to sound like somebody who's just glorifying the past and thinking little of the present, but it's not true. There's something else. I think many musicians will have this view to share. Then something very unexpected happened. I went for my holidays to Coimbatore when I was about 14, I think, and my grandmother lived there. So we had a tenant in my grandmother's house, a great violinist V. Sethuramaya, disciple of Mysore Chaudhaya. So he was there. His son was there, and he came to meet his son. And suddenly we had one glamorous 7-star visitor, Balamurli Krishna. So they had to pass my grandmother's house and get into their portion. So he was invited, and they asked me to play, of course. I played a Natakurji Varnam. It was something. It was something. It was very nice to be suddenly, without expecting. I had come for holidays, and to be suddenly sitting in front of Balamurli Krishna was hilarious. He was accompanied by S.V. Krishnan, the S.V. Krishnan of Ragasudha. At that time, Ragasudha was in Coimbatore. So, knowing S.V. Krishnan, I think he spotted that, what I needed. That is advanced training and other things. And he quickly put me to K.S. Narayanaswamy. Being in Bombay, I had already met him a couple of times. KSN was never quick to take any decision, or he took his time for just about anything. So though I had my mother had expressed interest that you should teach Jayashree, he said, yeah, இப்போ கத்துன்னு இருக்காளே கற்றுக்கட்டும், நல்லா தான் வாசிக்கிறா கற்றுக்கட்டும். It was going on like that. But then SVK came into the scene, and he said, no, you have to start immediately. And then he contacted KSN, and he said, you must teach this girl. Then he said, yeah, why not? And suddenly one day the teaching started. And the Shanmukananda Sabha music class, Veena class, as a group of students. So morning, the class started. My first song was Devi Jagajanani, Shankarabharanam, Navaratri Kirtane. My second song was Devadeva Kalayamite, Maya Malagule. He never talked much. He never started speaking about his style and saying that, this is not okay in what you know. He just started teaching. And I just started following him. And within a month, there was a difference. The active learning ended in 1985. That was about, say, 10, 12 years I had sat in front of him. After that, I would visit him. I performed the first concert in Coimbatore. SVK made me play it in Ragasudha. Then I knew how to put some songs together. It was great fun. And my mother would put talam for me, and I would play. So that again was something I did out of great interest and, organically. I didn't struggle with, Ragalapana or Kalpanaswara. So some hours of music practice happened without it being imposed on me. So I never felt the strain. So I did it happily like that. Considering that I was a small kid, he never taught me Arohana Varnam. He will start showing me the outline of the ragam. So it will be a brief Shankarabharanam, but it will be a 1.5 minute Shankarabharanam he will play, which you have to just repeat. That sort of nailed in many aspects of the ragam. For ragams like Anandaveri, Asaveri, Begada, Riti Gaulai, such Janya ragams, you just say, see, this is it, and you will not talk, just play. That's all. And then he would nod. So in time, I got to recognize various types of nods. And I realized one more big advantage, that hearing so much of music and also having learned vocal music, I was also learning from Ramachandran, Bombay Ramachandran, as he came to be known later. He was right in Shanmugananda Hall, and he was also a very strict taskmaster. And he would teach slightly rapidly in a different way. He would write beautiful notations on the blackboard, which you had to copy. He would tell you 2 times. Each Sangri will be taught 2 times, and the next class you must close your book and sing it. That gave me this, the technique of reading from notations. How to read a notation, how to write a notation, just came without anybody teaching me all those things. So I knew many songs. I had heard it or I knew it. And KSN, when he started to teach, he will look at me and say, Pada unda, அப்படின்னு கேட்பார். So eventually I will say, Pada undu, இல்லை கேட்டிருக்கேன், one of these two. So the meet, I would always place it, like how the song is heard. So when that Sahitya meet happened in the proper way, there would be one nod, which I recognized, you know. So it was a nod that, see, I have not told you this, but you're doing it, sort of nod. And other types of nod, which is, when a kalpanasara ended properly, or when an aspect of tanam, you picked up, small things. But that appreciation was one nod. That meant a lot. And SVK paid another visit to Bombay after this training started. And then KSN had written a letter to him. So he waved that blue Indian letter in front of me and said, Vadyar unna patti edirikar. Enna edirikar theriyadama? He said, I said, அவர் என்ன எதிர்பார்னு எனக்கு தெரியும். ஓ பரவாயில்லையே அப்படின்னா, So now I look back in slight horror, that might have been slightly audacious or irreverent. KSN had written to him, கையில் நல்ல ஓட்டம், நல்ல ஞானம், பொறுப்பேற்றேன் அப்படி எழுதியிருந்தார். I was overjoyed. Then Nipadamileni in Bhairavi happened. All these glorious songs, Meenakshi Memudam, O Jagadamba, and all those. Everything was a treasure. And I was listening to a lot of music. SVK would supply me with sackfuls of cassettes. I can't forget him. He's done a lot. He got me my Veena, which I'm playing today. But my parents had to take a small loan to buy that Veena. That's a different story. There was all kindness and joy in the atmosphere, and there was nothing imposed. And during all this, there was no demand that I become this or that. So it was, I was under a magnifying glass that was only learning. This happy memory stuck to me. KSN style, as opposed to other Veena styles, is a different, it's a different subject. What I absorbed was, and what is, that was close to vocal music renditions. So I did not, he never corrected one on the basis of how you hold your finger. How it sounded was what was important. And some fingering techniques is very normal for a Vainika, that you observe and assimilate by just watching. So it was not about this style, that style. At least for me, it was like that. But what I absorbed was KSN's way of playing. This tradition was not there with me, at least. I would never ask what I should play. I would just put my own list. I would never ask him what I should play. I would always end up listening to D.K. Patamal or KVN sing that same song vocally. It made a big difference. It made a lot of difference. So in one radio program, I played Meenakshi Memudam. So, there's a way KVN starts his raga alapna from the Daivadam. Like that. So that is unusual for a youngster to think of by herself, right? So I started my ragam like this. And KSN was overjoyed. He would never tell me directly, but then he would tell the others around in my class, the குழந்தை எவ்வளவு அழகா அந்த தெய்வதத்திலேருந்து ராகத்தை ஆரம்பிச்சா பாத்தியா அப்படி, that I heard from the others around me. He would never tell me directly. So all this gave me great encouragement. I think it impacted the way I taught my students later, much later. Because everything was quite happy for me. and practice was not inflicted. At the same time, it was necessary to, achieve what a student has to. Okay, for a particular concert in Bombay, it was a nice venue, the same Anushakti Nagar venue that I was so much in awe of. I got to perform there. And as usual, I made my own list where I had Madhyamavati as my main, Palim Sukamakshi, with Narwal Swaram and everything. I had Bilahari and Madhyamavati. She asked me what I was going to play. I told him, Changarabharanam Kalyani எதுவும் போடலையா தோடி எதனா போடலையா இல்லை சார் எனக்கு இதுதான் வாசிக்கணும் He didn't say anything. That was him. He just keep quiet. People perceive him as old fashioned and rigid, but it's not like that. It's definitely not like that. I knew it because I actively assimilated from many quarters. And by that time, the usual trajectory of a student, winning prizes and all this happened on the side, and I got the All India Radio first prize for Veena, and I started performing on the radio. Once in 6 months, there would be a program on Bombay All India Radio, which KSN would listen. He never had written notations, or I never had written notations for any song that I learned from him. It was all in memory. It still is. And then he never spoon fed. He taught the song. You could find out the lyrics if you wanted to. He will not go after you and ask, do you know the lyrics? Where are you going to play Nerval? On days he taught Nerval, it would be once in a great while. So it's your job to do all those things. So he never bothered about, going for competitions or getting us prepared for anything or radio upgradation and all. We'll just go and do whatever we thought is the best. But then later he would be proud of it. Once in Chennai in the season, I wanted to play Purvi Kalyani for one of the concerts. So I tried to I learned Ananda Natamaduvarthillai and I performed that song. Ramavarma was with me on a subsequent visit to KSN's house. So KSN asked me, என்ன வாசிச்சாய் நேத்தி கச்சேரியில் பூர்வி கல்யாணி சார். I keep it as brief as possible so that I don't want to give the answers which I don't want to give. So I didn't want to tell him I learned Ananda Natamaduvarthillai on my own. Somehow I didn't want to tell him. Why bother him with these unnecessary details, Ramavarma, of course, attended that concert. Then he said, Purvi Kalyaniyil enna vaasichai? So, Meenakshi Memudam and Parama Pavana Rama I had learned from KSN sir. But I did not play that. I played Ananda Natamaduvarthillai. But I did not want to tell him that. Then I said, Parama Rama sir அப்படின்னு ஒரு போய் சொன்னேன். அந்த சைட்லேருந்து Ramavarma was sitting there opposite to KSN. I went behind KSN and said, keep quiet, don't open your mouth. He was shocked, but then he said, he smiled. Then KSN said, Ananda Natamaduvarthillai கேட்டிருக்கியா அப்படி கேட்டார். I said, ஐயோ what did I get myself into? இதை நான் தான் சொரப்படுத்தினேன். அண்ணாமலை யூனிவர்சிட்டியில் இருக்கும்போது ராஜா சார் he commissioned a project to popularize Tamil songs, and lot of Tamil songs at that time, KSN and Gomati Shankarayar, they worked on a project and many songs came into light at that time. Tiruvadi Sharanam, Ananda Natamaduvarthillai, many Tamil songs. KSN, I've not heard him play a Pallavi line, okay? He would rather play a composition. But then, we are all young and want to do something. We want to play a Ragam Dhanam Pallavi and feel little important and big. So, I took a small Aditalam Pallavi and worked around it and sort of found my way. So, I played that Pallavi, and again I did not want to tell him. But he had a nosy neighbor, inconvenient nosy neighbor, who attended concerts. So she came stormed in one day when I was in his house in Chennai. எவ்வளோ நன்னா பல்லவி வாசிச்சா தெரியுமா அப்படின்னா ஐயோ I'm in trouble again. And then he looked at me and said, என்ன பல்லவி வாசிச்ச அப்படின்னா. So I said, கீரவாணியில் ஒரு பல்லவி, உனது பதம் துணையே. பல்லவி ஆரம்பத்தில் நீ என்ன பண்ண போகிற, இது கீரவாணியா சிமேந்திரமதிமா தெரியலையே உனது பதம் துணையே அப்படி அப்படி கீரவாணி வந்துடுத்து பார்த்தியா? That is case. Every inch he thinks ragam, appropriateness. Pause. This is how he thought Tanam should be played, and this is how he played the Tanam. This is not a comparison of styles. This is his idea of a Tanam. So, to start with, he said, don't use that format. He said, don't use that format. So, he said straight away start with the combination of 3 and 5. On the Veena, when you play a 3, the first and the third note has a meter. The middle note has the talam string playing gently. So the talam string comes gently. If it's a 5, it is 2 plus 3. If it's a 2, there is a meter and there is an empty swaram with a talam string. If it is 3, the first and third has a meter and the middle swaram is a swaram without the meter where the talam string figures. So, and also the ending format. The ending format that had to be done away with. So there is no fixed format that you can ever fall back upon. You have to always be thinking of the 3 and 5 combination, and then the ragam should be complete. And also he used 2 nyasa swarams for the tanam endings. So if it could be pa and sa, it could be madhimam and shadjamam, like that. Shadjamam and panchamam, or else he had all sorts of high and mighty musicians visiting him all the time. Semmangudi, Emma Sama always made it a point to visit when she was in Bombay. Vrindama, so many of them. He was known to be a teacher more than a performer, but then he held it so lightly that he never thought it as a disadvantage that he is not a sought after concept. that conviction amidst how he held on to a raga lapna, what he played was only what mattered to him and not what the audience would like to listen. Looks like one sided, but then that conviction was all that was. And I think that is what drew, you know, the other musicians to him. Much later, I had chance to meet Emma Sama, and then she told me, even now he talks to me about Danyasi and Todi. இது எத்தனை தரம் என்கிட்ட சொல்லியிருக்கார் தெரியுமா? And then she told me how he taught her, before her academy performance. He spent a month or more in Kalki Gardens, and there are many recordings available now from that period. And also, I got to spend a lot of time with him. I visited him in Trivandrum and I stayed in his house. So, what he listened to, how he observed, and I would listen along with him. And one day there was a Veena artist playing Ananda Bhairavi. Quietly he would listen. Quietly I was listening, and then after the performance he asked me, "Enna kettiya?" நான் கேட்டேன் சார், என்ன கேட்ட? இல்லை, அந்த ஆனந்த பேரவியில் தெய்வதத்துலேருந்து நிஷாதம் வேண்டாம் அப்படின்னு தோன்றுறது எனக்கு. Then he given bright laughter. I said, நீ அதை கவனிச்ச பற்றியா, அது எனக்கு சந்தோஷம். அவ்வளோதான். That's the end. So many things like that. His aesthetics, that is, how you don't prolong a re in todi. That's it. So at the student stage, to imbibe all this is, it's lifelong. It sticks. There are quite a few interesting things that KSN spoke about other musicians. When he was at Annamalai University, Tiger was the principal. KSN spoke about so many things about the maestro. So after college hours, he would go to meet Tiger, and Tiger would start singing. And then he spoke about a particular Saveri. He said, the effect is something very large and very beautiful. So in Saveri, it would rise to such a crescendo. And ரொம்ப சர்வசாதாரணமாக சரிகமா எல்லாம் வரும். ஸோ அதை பாடி காமிச்சார். அது ரொம்ப சாதாரணமாக வரும், ஆனால் ஒன்றும் சொல்ல முடியாது, பிகாஸ் இட் பி ஸோ மேஜிக்கல். அண்ட் he spoke about Tiger's Ananda Bhairavi. He loved the way how Tiger sang the ragam and sang O Jagadamba. And the Kannatandri Charanam, Tiger would explain. இந்த மாதிரி உலகத்தை காக்கிற தாயே, நான் ஒத்தன் ஜாஸ்தி ஆயிட்டேனா அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு அந்த சரணத்தை பாடுவார். ஸோ இட்ஸ் வெரி மூவிங் டு ஹியர் தட். And that I felt that moment was precious, because again it referred to an era which we can glimpse only by this route of somebody who has interacted with those people. Another precious recollection would be Karakudi Sambasivaiyar, again at visiting Annamalai University when KSN was teaching there. Sambasivaiyar, all of us know, he was an icon for Veena music and the Karakudi style. So Sambasivaiyar would not let anybody even go near his Veena. But after class hours, he would call KSN, and then he allowed him to play on his Veena, which itself KSN considers a big honor. KSN played Ni Padumileni by Ravi, and then he heard with rapt attention. He liked the Raga Alapana very much. And after the song, he asked KSN to play the song again from the Pallavi. So he wanted to check whether how authentic the Sangadis are, whether the Patantaram is solid, exact. So this KSN recalled with some amusement. One more is Maharani Setu Parvati Bai, a connoisseur of simply listening to music. She has been associated with so many greats during her time. She loved Keson's music, and he played unfailingly the Navaratri Mandapam concerts every year, I think close to about 45 years. So she would often summon him and ask him to play. And her jnanam was so exact and precise. So she would ask him to play Begada. And then immediately she would ask him to play Nayaki. So அந்த ரெண்டு ராகம் கலக்காம வருதா நான் அந்த தெய்வதத்தை நிஷாதத்தை எப்படி வாசிக்கிறேன். Kesan treasured his memories with the Dhanammal family. He said one thing, after their times, many people say Dhanammal Vinay, but then very few had access to her music. It was not easy to go and sit in her Friday evening concerts. But you hear so many people talking about Dhanammal's Veena without actually knowing anything about it. He spoke about Brinda and Mukta a lot. He said on one day, he said, பிருந்தாம்மா வந்து எங்கள் ஆற்றுல உங்கள் வீணை தான் கேட்பா அப்படின்னு சொன்னா. ஸோ எனக்கு அதுவே போகும். It is more than any other honor or title I have ever received. That I treasure. He was slightly alarmed about the trend in a certain music discussion in Shanmugananda Sabha that Carnatic music is ruled by compositions and then we don't have freedom to for raga exposition and the way Hindustani people have. I said this is a very wrong approach. Our ragas are alive because of our compositions. It's not fair to compare Hindustani and Carnatic music from this angle because the difference lies there. So you need not sound like a Hindustani musician. Likewise, a Hindustani musician cannot start singing ritis. So this is he did not like this idea at all. Train journeys with him used to be great fun because he'd pack 3/4 of his household in different suitcases of different sizes. And he would occupy the window seat, and the journey he would purchase everything that came across, fruits, everything, just about anything he would purchase on the way. Once he bought one half basket of lemons on a train journey, and his wife was aghast. Said, "What am I supposed to do with the half basket of lemons?" on a journey from Mumbai to Chennai. So the wife would have to deal with this enormous consignment of lemons and turn it into a pickle when she reached her hotel room. So this is, that is him. You would think like that. And then if this train suddenly stopped in a place that's not smelling very pleasant, he would say, அந்த பொட்டி இந்த மூணாவது பொட்டி இருக்கு பார்த்தியா அதில் ஊதுவத்தியும் பேட்சஸும் வச்சுருக்கேன் அதை எடு அப்படி அப்போ அதை எடுத்து you have to light it. Like that he would come prepared. And throughout the journey, he would have visiting relatives and who would supply him with arishi upma, molagu korambu, vatta korambu, aviyal adai, everything will come at different times of the day. And then he would be busy in seeing that, the train would start and it has to be, transferred into the proper containers, he would say, and the wife would later on admonish him. வா கொண்டு வந்திருக்காளே அவள்கிட்ட 2 வார்த்தை பேச மாட்டேளா. And you could do nothing but sit there and laugh. As a person, he had great refined taste. His colors would always be subdued. And he had an eye for fine fabrics, good taste in food. His the idli has to be made by mommy, and should be like a mallipu, and it would always be. He would say, and the mallipu atama irukku paathiya idli, adha saaptuttu po. He'll say, always after class I would go to his house and I would get something to eat. Then he had a small bottle of sandalwood oil. So he would open it and then take it like that. The sandalwood bottle will go like that, and then that's it. And then he will start his Danyasi or his Ananda Berry like that. So all this had a place. And his conversation was also like that. He never spoke fast, or he very rarely was agitated in his speech. Sometimes he could get irritated by small things, but then there would be one great repose and measure in his conversation. It will be spread out. There will be long pauses. You have to wait for. He'll hold you in suspense about what he's going to say next. He had a habit of collecting boxes. So from such a small box to such a large box, he'll have boxes in all sizes in his house. And then mommy would call, this trash picker. It was called Juna Purana Saman Wala in Bombay. So the Juna Purana Saman Wala will be summoned, and one of us always did it. So she'll make a collection of things that has to be disposed of. Then KSN would appear on the scene. He will adjust his spectacles, look at it, peer like that, and then he would not allow any box to go out of the house. Then he would peer into that Juna Purana Saman Wala's collection and pick up things from there. Mami will be aghast. And on a trip, he will pack all these things. So, one trip from Mumbai to Trivandrum means so many things which you will never expect will be available for the trip. The texture, the softness of the idli and vadai is something, exacting standards, as is raga grammar. So, somebody had given him vadai. A student for Varalakshmi Vradam made vadai and it was in his house. Chelama, கடப்பாறை ஒன்று கொண்டா இந்த வடையை அப்போ தான் சாப்பிட முடியும். He had a taste for eating salty, oily things which he should not have been eating. He had a little bit of a BP. The BP testing ritual will be one another thing. They would go to the clinic and nearby Varadachari doctor in Bombay, just outside Shanmugananda, and the BP would be tested. And then he would get instruction not to eat tatta, mudku, chida, everything. He was very fond of eating all those things and not going for walks. He never believed in the morning walk ritual. And mommy will prod him gently to go for a walk, which he never did, as far as I knew. And then he spoke suddenly about some athlete who spent so much of, I forget the name. And then one day, that person passed away. Then KSN said, அவன் போனான் சொர்க்கத்துக்கு, அப்புறம் என்ன பண்ணினான், ஓடினான் வாழ்க்கை முழுக்க. என்னத்ரா பண்ணினேன்னா ஓடினேன்னா, ஸோ அதை பண்ணாட்டா இப்போ என்ன அப்படிம்பார். ஸோ லைக் that was his answer for not going for morning walks and getting his BP high. A gentle humor, very observant. In the middle of the conversation, he would always clear his throat. And there would be a pause. And then you have to wait for what's going to come next. And then in his sentence, the Tamil word ever had a place, prominent place. So he would use it rather frequently and sometimes, very inappropriately. It would be very amusing. But then he never bothered. It's been a very fulfilling, glorious learning period, which continued, and when I continued to visit him, first in Trivandrum and then in Chennai, when he stayed with his son. So it was one December festival time. I think I came to perform for Carnatic Fine Arts, and I had an unusual date of 5th December or something like that. 4th December, something very early in the month. So I came for a concert, I played the concert, I went and met him. He was fine, he was his usual self. That is, whenever he saw me, his face would light up. And I'll be waiting for the 3 or 4 days I'm in Madras. I'll be waiting for the time of the day when I'll be coming and spending the day with him. So one day he said, I want to meet MS Subbalakshmi. So we took a cab and we went out. He was very happy that day. We met MS. It was such a grand meeting, and I stood in a corner and was just observing. I wanted to disappear. And they spoke of old times. KSN showed her a letter which Sadashiva Mama had written before her Kalanidhi, asking KSN to come to Kalki Gardens and play the Veena with her for a month at least. So they were talking about those old times, and it was time to leave. And then on the way, he asked me to stop by the Avin parlor, in Adyar. Then he got palgova and flavored milk and sapota param and everything. And then we went home, and he said he made sure I got everything to eat first. Then he said, இப்போ நமஸ்காரம் பண்ணாத, அப்புறம் நான் சீக்கிரமாக கிளம்புறேன் இப்போ நமஸ்காரம் பண்ணாத அப்படின்னு. Then he offered to play that day. So I went to the adjoining room. He was seated on a cot. He asked me to get his veena, and he played. He played many things. He played Madhimati, Suruti. He played those Ramayana slokam, the Mangala slokams. And then he said, இந்த பற்றியா அந்த மீட்டு போடனா வார்த்தை தெரியாட்டாலும் வேணே வார்த்தை சொல்கிற மாதிரி இருக்கணும். That he said. Then he explained Madhimavati, Sriragam and Maniranga, and said where the emphasis differs in each of these ragams so that there is no doubt. And afterwards he played all these slokams. He played Shruti, and then he looked at me and said, Porum. Well, that was the end. He said, Porum. And I told him I'll come soon, and he's well. I'll just come in the next 2 months I'll be back again. I told him all those things. He said, he gave me the veena to put in its place. And that night I took the train, and by the time I reached Bombay, he was not there. I just went quietly. No fanfare. No. Content with the company he had, conviction with the music he had. I think these two things made an impact. That period of learning was intense. It was gentle. It didn't make any demands on my natural state. I continued to imbibe happily without any pressure. So long after I have stopped learning, even today, sometimes I feel the lesson comes very alive, especially when I teach and when I remember. So I always put him in the classroom in front of me. So my experience of teaching always will go through that prism and reach my students. And I always see myself as one of my students sitting in front of him even today. So that has brought many good things. I notice a total absence of hierarchy when I teach, because I always think it's not me. And I always look at the lesson afresh. Sometimes it may be small things, sometimes it may be very small things, but I feel it adds up to a certain effect, which is apparent when I hear the students sing the same song to me. Many times I wish KSN heard this. And I think how he would have appreciated their singing, because some ragams like Mukari, Kedaragole, Shuruti. So when they've grasped the essentials of it. Of course, there is a lot more to do. They have a lot more to see. But then at this level, what they've grasped, I feel happy with. And when they ask questions about allied ragams, and I always make it a point to think along with them. I had this wonderful opportunity of learning from Brindama. Brindama had been visiting Mumbai city for many years, but a special workshop was arranged for a few of us. I think this was in 93 or 94. She taught us some padam, some javalis. She taught us Telisendra and Saveri, Talachinavaru, and it was a very, very grand experience. She could listen to each one of us even if we were in a group. She would not encourage us to write down anything by notation, or use the notation or notebook in any way. யாராவது நொட்டேஷனை ரொம்ப வச்சுட்டா பேசாமல் அதை கடிச்சு சாப்பிட்டுடு அப்படிங்குவா. Then she taught us Sri Matrubhutam in Kannada. So actually I had learned that song from KSN, and it was his sort of it was very established in my uh, way of playing. So I could not bring myself to say that no, I know this song, especially when we were in a group. So I said, anyway, I'll mouth it along. I'm in a group. She will not find out. But I am not going to learn this version. So the class started, and 5 minutes into the class, she looked straight into my eye and said, "Na, Gurunadhar solli vechirukara இந்த பாட்டை." I sheepishly nodded. And then, oh, அப்படின்னுட்டு she continued the class. That was her observation. And any sangati, நீ பாடு அப்படிப்பா. அப்புறம் I could sense that I was making her happy in some way, and I felt good. But it was an experience just to be in front of her and see how the sangatis are simply falling. Her Saveri, when learning Telisenura from her was completely magic. And so it happened. She had a couple of concerts, and we were all attending. We were all just where she was in those 10 days. We were there, and they had organized a dinner or something. On that day, I could not go. But I sent my mother. I said, "You go. I can't come today. But please tell her that I'm not feeling very well. But you go." And she went. And then Alamelmani introduced her, saying that இதுதான் ஜெயஸ்ரீயோட அம்மா அப்படின்னு. She came up to my mother, caught hold of her hands and said, எனக்கு ஜெயஸ்ரீயை கண்டா ரொம்ப பிடிக்கும், அவள் பரம ஞானஸ்தி. I'm embarrassed to talk about this, but I've heard lot of Brinda music, heard lot of concerts before that time, familiar with her way of singing. And the next day I went back to the class. She looked at me and said, "Na, ஜுரம் எப்படி இருக்கு?" I played the Veena for her. I chose some ragas which KSN sir had spoken to me about in his interactions with Vrindama. So that was Asaveri, which I played first, and I played Purvi Kalyani. So I'm a fan of Brindama's Purvi Kalyani and the way she holds her Gandharam. I played that in front of her. I played that phrase. And then, oh, she said. And then immediately she said, Todivasi. I was really terrified. But I did what I could. It was an experience. It was a very grand experience that I will just treasure. In the same way, I learnt a little bit from KVN. He taught me Akshayalinga Vibho. He taught me the Kannada Tilana, Dasharathi. He would be seated on a bed and I would be sitting down. The original way in which he handled his compositions, his sangatis. So he will say, "Idu modal sangatiya vechko," அப்படிம்பார். And there would be a sequence of sangatis. The next day it would have modified a little bit. He will say, "இன்னைக்கு இத முதல் சங்கதியா வச்சுக்கோ," அப்படிம்பார். NCPA in Mumbai is a beautiful space. There are several theatres by the seaside, and the person who was managing the affairs of Carnatic music and dance had taken a break. So I was just wondering, I had a longing that if I could get to work in this space, it would be nice. So I just made a call and I asked, I inquired, and there was a vacancy for that space. And then Mrs. Vijaya Mehta, the great Marathi theatre personality, she interviewed me. She was my boss. And I spent some 5 or 6 beautiful years in NCPA. Wonderful colleagues. I made great friends with writers, poets, musicians. It was so culturally alive. Every evening there used to be something, poetry reading, or I could attend any event that I wished to. I could stay back. I got exposed to a lot of creative thinking minds, lot of creative spirits. I came in touch with many artists who I could invite from Chennai. It was a very glorious time. Like I was managing a very shoestring budget, and I also coordinated with some other sabhas in Mumbai who could host these artists, so they could have some more remuneration for all the effort they've done. So everybody was happy in general. And I had a very, very good time there. Around 2007 or 2008, Sadhguru invited me to Isha Samskriti. He was starting Isha Samskriti at that time, and he said, "You should be here from the inception." That meant leaving Bombay. And I took that leap. And I spent a good 14 years in Isha after that time. It was a brand new beginning. And I had some tiny tots in front of me. I was supposed to teach them the basics. Maybe I started the Varshais and moved to Varnams. So I taught them with great focus. I had a lot of work to do. But one thing I did was I never drew up a syllabus. And for academic reasons, later, if I had to draw up a syllabus, I didn't remember my syllabus, so I just taught what I had to do the next day. So very soon these children were singing Pancharatnams from Varnams, and very soon they were singing Swarajatis. And then I introduced them to Ragams one by one, and they were picking up very well. So they became familiar with Shankarabharanam, Sahana, Yadugula Kamboji. They were singing the Swarajatis well, and they were visiting musicians for their annual Yaksha festival. So we used to invite these musicians over to our class, and they always came and heard the children. They were all praised for the way they are singing. Many of them visited the class. T.V. Shankar Narayanan sir, VVS, violin VVS. Many of them, Vijay Shiva, T.N. Krishnan, all of them visited, in those few years. And children were making fantastic progress. I enjoyed the time. And they were a noisy chatterbox bunch. And we visited Tiruvarur. They learnt all the Navavarnams, like starting from the Dhyanam to the Mangalam Kriti. They could sing the 11 songs in a row. So we used to visit Tiruvarur temple, sing in the Prakaram. It was great fun. And then we had train trips. We used to travel to Bombay or, here and there for competitions, and they would win some, they would lose some. But then it was completely full of excitement. And then we had interesting workshops. We invited many musicians. I could just do what I felt was right for the children. So things that I didn't know, I invited people so that they could learn, and I learned along with them. Many times the children told me, "You are just one among us. We don't feel that you are the elder in our group." I enjoy the time, and students are still with me. After hearing the students sing their Mukhari or Kedar Gaulai, I always wished KSN was around to hear his version of songs in vocal music. Another thing that was special about the teaching at that time is it was not oriented towards any goal other than learning and learning well. I think that sort of approach made a difference. I was happy to do it. It was good till it lasted. I think many times people think uh, an intensive way to learn is only if there is a concert goal in front of the student. But that's not true. Without a concert looming in the horizon, they are able to give relaxed attention and focus on many other little things. And should a concert come up, then it is just taking it from there. It is happy learning vis-a-vis some programmed uh, churning out concert matinee successes. In my opinion, students should figure out their concert hacks on their own when they come to it. Of course, a little help here and there is welcome, but then that it should not be predominant, like churning out performance puppets. That makes it hollow. That reduces the purpose of the beauty and largeness of art.